Before we get into the video, I want to talk about our two sponsors. We've got TCGplayer.com. Use our affiliate link down below when you're shopping on TCGplayer.com. It helps support the channel. And then we've also got Dragon Shield. They have some of the best Magic the Gathering accessories out there. Check them out as well. Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. I'm your host, Mike, and on this week's episode, we bring you Veyran, Voice of Duality at a $100 budget. Veyran's 1, a blue, and a red for a legendary creature, Efreet Wizard. It has magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Veyran, Voice of Duality, gets +1/+1 until end of turn. If you casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Veyran has a very powerful ability. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell and it causes a trigger of a permanent you control to trigger, it's going to trigger an additional time. So this is Panharmonicon for creatures that trigger whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. So very powerful ability on Veyran. This deck is going to play out like a spellslinger type of deck. There's a ton of instant sorcery spells in this deck because you want to be able to trigger Veyran multiple times. Veyran's ability also of getting +1/+1 every time you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, that magecraft ability, is going to trigger twice because of Veyran's second ability as well. So Veyran can get very big very quickly. We have a lot of things that are going to take advantage of Veyran's second ability of double triggers whenever an instant or sorcery spell causes something to trigger, so that magecraft ability. So we have a lot of different cards in here that take advantage of magecraft. Not only the magecraft ability, but there's a lot of cards in Magic the Gathering's history that have magecraft on them without having the keyword. This is the first time that there was a keyword created, but there's a lot of spells out there that say whenever you cast or spell, such and such happens. So we do have a lot of magecraft abilities in here that are going to take advantage of Veyran's ability. Like I said, we have a lot of instant and sorcery spells in here. So Veyran can get very big. It's going to be easy to get that 21 commander damage on one of your opponents because of how many instant and sorcery spells we're going to be casting each turn. It's going to get out of hand pretty quickly. We do want several ways in the deck to try to rebuy our spells. Cards that let us cast spells out of our graveyard, buy them back, things like that. Because there's a finite amount of spells that you can put in this deck, we do want ways of getting them back. This deck has a Voltron/combo play style to it. There's going to be turns where you're going off and you're going crazy. You can kill like one or two of your opponents because Veyran can deal so much damage. And we also have all those other magecraft creatures in here that deal damage to your opponents whenever you cast a spell as well. Let's go over the stats in this deck. So in this deck, we've got 10 ramp spells. We've got 21 ways of drawing cards. Now, one thing to note with that number is a lot of these are cantrips. I included in the card draw category because it does say draw a card, but these are going to be cantrip type abilities on here. It's not just net you one card. We have 11 ways of interacting with our opponents. Most of those are going to be through counter spells we have in this deck. We have 35 instant or sorcery spells in here, which are essential to this deck. You want to have a maximum number of instant or sorcery cards in here that work with Veyran's abilities. We have 18 spellslinger payoffs, magecraft type spells in here. And then we have 37 lands in this deck. The asterisk is because we do have modal double-faced cards in here that are a land on one side and an instant or sorcery on the other. Let's get into the deck tech. Let's start out this deck tech by talking about some of the ways that we're able to draw cards with this deck. We do have some powerful card draw engines in here. So first up, we've got Jori-En Ruin Diver. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card. Then we've got Wave Break Hippocamp. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card. And then Archmage Emeritus has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. These are all great with Veyran on the battlefield. If you have Veyran out there, these are all going to trigger twice because you have that Panharmonicon. Whenever you cast a spell, it's going to trigger an ability of a permanent you control twice. So these are all going to draw you multiple cards whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. Then we've got a couple of ways of refilling our hand. We've got Valakut Awakening, which is a modal double-faced card, which is a land on one side and an instant on another. Put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1. We've also got Windfall in here. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. Then we have Wheel of Misfortune. This is a cheaper version of Wheel of Fortune. The only downside to this is you do have to play some games to be able to draw those cards, but if you play this right, you'll easily be able to discard your hand and then draw 7. Next up, I want to talk about some of the combat tricks that we have in this deck that also can cantrip us into more cards. Now, these are very powerful in this deck because they're low converted mana cost. They're going to draw us additional cards. Some of them also target our creatures, and we have ways of copying those spells whenever we target. And they also are going to gain us some type of advantage. So some of these give our creatures haste. Some of them give our creatures evasion, which is very good with Veyran because we are going to want to be able to swing with Veyran and potentially close out the game through Voltron as well. So first up, we've got Leap. It's an instant. Target creature gains flying until end of turn, and then you draw a card. A surprise how expensive this card is. It was only printed in Stronghold, but with the combination of Veyran and also Orvar, this card has gone up quite a bit from what I remember it, and it's now a $2 card. Then we've also got Thermal Flux. This is another one that's gone up since Orvar has been printed. It's an instant. Choose one. Target non-snow permanent becomes snow until end of turn, or target snow permanent isn't snow until end of turn. And then it has the most important part on here. Draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. Again, this targets your creatures, also draws you a card, so you're going to cantrip, so it replaces itself. And then with something like Orvar on the battlefield, you can copy whatever you target with this. And then when we talk about some of the other cards in here that are good with spells that target them, you'll see why this card is in the deck. Crimson Wisp is an instant out of Shadowmoor. Target creature becomes red and gains haste until end of turn, and then draw a card. Then we've got Expedite. Target creature gains haste until end of turn, and then draw a card. Renegade Tactics. Target creature can't block this turn, draw a card, and then Crash Through. Creatures you control gain trample until end of turn, and then draw a card. I like this one in here, even though it doesn't target your creatures. It does give Veyran trample, so he'll be able to punch through some blockers if needed as well. Then we've got Fists of Flame. It's an instant. Draw a card until end of turn. Target creature gains trample and gets +1/+1 for each card you've drawn this turn. This card can get nutty. You can essentially kill an opponent with this card because you're going to be drawing so many cards with Veyran on the battlefield, plus also giving him trample as well. And then I also like Accelerate in here as well. Similar to Crimson Wisp, it's going to give your creature haste and then also draw a card. So you can play Veyran, play Crimson Wisp, Accelerate, give it haste, and then start going off that way and then get some damage in on your opponents. A couple of really good cards that combo well with the combat tricks that we have in this deck. First up, we've got Beam Splitter Mage. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Beam Splitter Mage, if you control one or more other creatures that spell could target, choose one of those creatures, copy that spell. This copy targets the chosen creature. So if you have this on the battlefield with Veyran, you're going to target Beam Splitter Mage with your spell. You're going to get that spell on the stack. Then it's also going to copy and target your Veyran as well. So you're going to get another copy of that. And then the cool thing with this is a lot of the magecraft abilities in here also work off of copies as well. So Veyran's going to trigger both times because it's a copy. So he's going to get the +1/+1 counters off the first spell, plus also the copy. If you have something like Archmage Emeritus on the battlefield, you're going to draw cards off the first one and then also off the second one as well, since it's a copy and it has Magecraft. Zada is an upgraded version of Beam Splitter Mage. It's a little bit crazier. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Zada, copy that spell for each other creature you control that the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So if you have Zada on the battlefield with Veyran and let's just say a bunch of tokens that you made off of Talrand, and you cast Expedite on Zada, it's going to copy it for all of those tokens on the battlefield plus Veyran. And then if you have something like Archmage Emeritus on the battlefield, you're going to draw a ton of cards. It can get really, really crazy. Something like Orvar on the battlefield, you're going to create a copy of all of those tokens and Zada and all that stuff as well. As you can see, Zada being on the battlefield is like an instant kill for your opponents. They need to kill that thing or you're going to go off really, really quickly. It is a very powerful card in this deck. Next up, let's go over some of the token producers we have in this deck. So we do have a couple of cards in here that whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, they're going to give us a token. So we have Young Pyromancer. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 elemental creature token. Talrand has the same text on it, except it creates 2/2 Drake creature tokens with flying. And then Orvar, the all form. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents, which is very good in this deck because we do have a lot of combat tricks in here that we're able to target our own things. So we are going to be able to make a lot of copies with Orvar on the battlefield. Things can get nutty pretty quickly. And again, with Veyran on the battlefield, all these are going to trigger 2 times since it does have that Panharmonicon type text on it. Next up, let's go over a couple other creatures that work well with Veyran. These have Magecraft type abilities on them that are going to deal damage to your opponents whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell. First up, we've got Firebrand Archer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Electrostatic Field has the same exact text on it, except it says instant or sorcery instead of non-creature. Thermal Alchemist has Defender, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, untap Thermal Alchemist. Then we've got G-Electrode. It's similar to Thermal Alchemist. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. The nice thing about this is it can target creatures as well, not just your opponents. And same thing, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to untap it. Gutter Snipe, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. And then we also have Ral, Snore Conduit. It's a planeswalker out of War of the Spark. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. It has a +2 where you can scry 1, and then it has a -2 that when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, you get to copy it, and you can choose new targets for the copy. So all these are going to deal quite a bit of damage to your opponents if they stick around on the battlefield. Something like Gutter Snipe is going to deal 4 damage every time you cast an instant or sorcery spell to each of your opponents with Veyran on the battlefield. Next up, I want to talk about a couple of cards that have magecraft or magecraft type abilities that are going to generate us mana whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell. So first up, we've got Birgi, God of Storytelling. This is a newer one out of Kaldheim. It's a legendary creature. Whenever you cast a spell, add red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And then it's got another ability we don't care about boasting. But this is a very powerful storm commander in its own right. If you're able to cast a lot of spells, this can get out of hand, especially if you have a low converted mana cost deck. It's going to generate you a lot of mana. And then the nice thing about this and the other card we're about to talk about is if you have Veyran on the battlefield, this is going to trigger twice. So every time you cast a spell, you're going to gain 2 red. And then the next card, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you're going to create a treasure token. So again, you'll create 2 treasure tokens with Veyran on the battlefield, and things can get out of hand very quickly because we have so many spells that cost 1 or 2 mana in here that also cantrip us into other cards. You're going to be able to storm off with Veyran on the battlefield, potentially get him up to that 21 commander damage, and then kill one of your opponents, or use Gutter Sniper or some of the other cards in here, storm off and kill all of your opponents at once. So you do have some combo potential with both of these cards. Next up, let's talk about some of the utility cards that we have in here that don't really fit into any of the other categories. First up, we've got Krark the Thumbless. It's a legendary creature out of Commander Legends. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return that spell to its owner's hand. If you win the flip, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. This also has partner as well. This card is really great. Whether you win or lose, you're getting some benefit off of this. If you lose the flip, you get to return that spell to your hand, but you'll still get any triggers that you have from any magecraft type abilities on the battlefield. So if Veyran's on the battlefield, you're going to pump him up, and you also get to return that spell back to your hand. And if you win the flip, you get to copy it, getting 2 spells off of it, which is really great. So this card is awesome in this deck. Next up, we got another powerful one. We've got Metallurgic Summonings. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token where X is that spell's mana value. And then you can pay 5 and exile it, return all instant or sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand, activate it only if you control 6 or more artifacts. So getting a construct token every time you cast an instant or sorcery spell is very powerful. This will double up with Veyran on the battlefield as well. And that second ability, don't sleep on that one either. This is another way to get your instant and sorcery cards back, like Past in Flames and some of the other cards that we have in here. So this is a really powerful one in the deck. It actually comes in the pre-constructed deck well. And then last but not least, we do have Double Vision in the deck. It's an enchantment out of M21. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you get to copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Copying is awesome in this deck because we're going to get the double triggers off Veyran because Magecraft cares about copies just as much as casting spells as well. Next up, let's go over some of the ways that we're able to bring our instant and sorcery spells back, be able to cast them multiple times in the game. And we do want ways of bringing our instant and sorcery spells back. We have a lot of cheap instant and sorcery cards in here that cantrip, draw us additional cards, etc. that are going to be powerful with Veyran on the battlefield, especially if we have some of those other pieces that deal damage to our opponents or draw us cards. We can combo very well with these cards. So first up, we've got Past in Flames. It's a sorcery. Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost, and then this also has flashback. So you can play this more than once if it's in your graveyard for its flashback cost. Then we got Mizzix's Mastery. This one was just reprinted as a mystical archive in the set, so the price has gone down quite a bit from before. So this one's exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and then exile Mizzix's Mastery. And then this has the very powerful Overload ability for 5 5 and 3 red. You can cast it for its overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So if you overload this will bring back all the instant or sorcery cards from your graveyard, and you'll get to cast them for free, which is insane. Like I said, we do have a ton of cantrips and cards that draw us cards in this deck, so we'll be able to storm off if we're able to play this card. It can get pretty crazy. Next up, let's go over the 4 non-budget cards I added to upgrade this deck. If you like seeing these upgrades in this video, let me know down in the comments below. So first up, we're going to add in Isochron Scepter. This is a very powerful artifact out of originally Mirrodin, but it was just recently reprinted in Double Master, so the price has gone down a little bit. It has imprint. When Isochron Scepter enters the battlefield, you may exile an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand, and you can pay 2 and tap it. You may copy the exiled card. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Now, this card is an infinite combo with Dramatic Reversal, which we don't have in the deck, and I'm actually not putting it in the upgrade section. I feel like the Dramatic Reversal Isochron Scepter combo is just very played out for me personally. I've put it in a lot of decks. We've seen it a million times, and I just don't find it fun to win that way. But this card is very good in the deck because we have so many instant cards in here that cost 2 or less. Being able to reuse those spells each turn is very powerful. You can also put something like a counterspell in here, and then you'll have a repeatable way to counter your opponent's spells each turn as well. I did take out Ral Storm Conduit to replace it with Isochron Scepter. I do like Ral quite a bit, don't get me wrong, but I do find that Planeswalkers are a constant target, and in this deck, we don't have a lot of ways of protecting Ral, so you're going to put him on the battlefield, and then your opponents are just going to swing and take him out, unless you have some form of way of protecting him. Next up, we're going to put in Flusterstorm. It's a 1 mana counterspell that counters target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1. It does have Storm, so when you cast a spell, copy for each spell cast before this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy, and then we're going to take out Arcane Denial. Flusterstorm is extremely good in this deck. Any card with Storm really is going to be good because Magecraft triggers off of copies as well. So if you're able to cast a couple spells before you cast this Flusterstorm, you could potentially cast 3, 4, 5 copies of Flusterstorm. Veyran on the battlefield, he's going to get +2/+2 every single time you cast or copy a spell. So as you can see, Veyran can get big really quickly with something like Flusterstorm on the stack. Next up, we've got Underworld Breach. This is a very powerful card out of Theros Beyond Death. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. At the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. So this is similar to Past in Flames in the deck. It's going to give us a way of rebuying our instant and sorcery spells, and actually any non-land card in our deck as well. So you can get some of those creatures back, like Gutter Snipe, things like that your opponents have killed throughout the course of the game, and have a chance to rebuy them. If you have it, definitely included in this deck. And we took out Izzet Charm. Izzet Charm's a great card, but I find that it's not as powerful as some of the other options in here. And we do have quite a few ways of interacting with our opponents in this deck. Next up, we're going to put in 1,000 Year Storm. This is one of my favorite cards. It gets absolutely crazy in a deck like this. It is a 6 mana enchantment that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So with this on the battlefield with Veyran out, you're going to actually trigger this 2 times each instant sorcery spell you cast. It's going to get absolutely nutty. Get out your calculator. It's going to be really hard to count how many triggers, how many spells you're going to have on the stack with this card out there. If you cast this card and your opponents don't have an answer to it, and you have Veyran on the battlefield, you're going to win the game. Plain and simple. All you need to do is cast a couple of spells. Veyran's going to get out of control real quick. And I did take out Expansion Explosion. I do like this card a lot. It does have flexibility in being able to copy and also deal damage to any target / draw cards. But 1,000 Year Storm, the impact it has on the game is crazy. If you are able to cast this card and it resolves, you'll win the game. Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you like this video and you want to see more Budget Commander content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also check us out on patreon.com/BudgetEDH. There's a bunch of different tiers and ways to interact with us outside of YouTube. We'll see you guys next time.